I think I can say in radio terms I kind of broke the Roman Abramovich story, which is one of the reasons why I'm returning it today. Let me be clear. This is not a football story. This is not Talk Sport. I'm not a Chelsea supporter, and I like Roman Abramovich even less than I like Chelsea. But it was an act of self-harm, petty, puerile, self-disfiguring act by the government to effectively ban the owner of Chelsea from the FA Cup final where his own team was playing. A team that he, from his pocket, has invested many, many hundreds of millions of pounds as part of the government's puerile and increasingly isolated Russophobic campaign of seeking to harm, damage, and quite possibly destroy our relations with an important European power just as we leave the European Union. It was, of course, entirely discriminatory. London is chock full of oligarchs of different colours. It's chock full of people with their pockets full of dirty money. No one is suggesting that Abramovich's money is dirty. If it had been, he wouldn't have been allowed to own an English Premiership club now, would he? Abramovich's money is therefore officially certified as clean. Yet, the government, by deliberately delaying the renewal of his visa, has encouraged him to become a citizen of Israel, which he did overnight, which is a story in itself. He thought, or we thought, perhaps hoped, that that would be the end of the matter. He could come and go visa-free as a new citizen of Israel. But it's not the end of the story. Yesterday, in retaliation, Abramovich cancelled the £1 billion expenditure on the development of the Stamford Bridge Stadium, costing hundreds, maybe thousands of jobs, depriving the British economy of what would have been an accelerator, a multiplier expenditure of £1 billion, which could have gone on to fuel billions more of economic activity, could have redeveloped entirely an important part of the London landscape. You see, actions have consequences. When you spit in someone's eye, when you spit in the well, don't imagine that you may regret not any longer being able to drink from it. That's an old Russian saying. It just occurred to me as quite an important one in this story. Don't spit in the well because you may have to drink from it. Well, we won't be drinking any more from Abramovich. So I hope Boris Johnson and the Foreign Office, who deliberately committed this act, are held to account for their actions. And I hope Boris Johnson is held to account for his actions in previous incarnations. Because I was seething with rage yesterday at the article in the London Review of Books, which sought to place the blame for the towering inferno of Grenfell, which incinerated scores of people and scorched the lives forever after of hundreds of people, children included. It sought to place the blame not on the manufacturers of cyanide panels, who sold them against the regulations to a contractor who knowingly applied them to a tower block against the regulations, rather than the Kensington and Chelsea council boffins and mandarins who signed off the work against the regulations. rather than those officials of KNC who ignored every warning from the people living in Grenfell Tower that their accommodation was a death trap. No, Andrew O'Hagan wants to blame the fire brigade. But he didn't blame the former Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, for presiding over the decimation of London's firefighting capacity, about which the London Evening Standard had been entirely mute over the period of Johnson's 8 years in power in City Hall in London. Actions have consequences. Unfortunately, the actions and the consequences are usually far removed from the people taking the actions. You see, Boris Johnson isn't going to die in a tower block on fire when the fire brigade can't reach you. And the new Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, God forbid, is not going to die in a hail of machine gun bullets in Brent, where I live, just moments away from where my children were playing in the garden. A man was shot down by 17 automatic fire bullets. A machine gun attack in daylight in London in 2018, in May. And I drove yesterday and today past Cathcart Road in Kensington, a posh part of Kensington, where the houses, terraced houses, cost millions of pounds. A father of 3 young children was stabbed to death in the street whilst going about his job as a delivery driver. No arrests have yet been made. It brought to 70 the number of people murdered in London before the end of May. 70, placing us on track for a London record. We're already more dangerous than New York City. Imagine. The Mayor of London is more concerned, at least that's how it looks to me, with the fact that London's cyclists are too male, too middle class, and too white. You couldn't make this up. Instead of being out on the street, high-vis, demanding the restoration of the government's London police cuts, instead of heading up a task force to come to grips with a murder rate which is simply terrifying Londoners, the Mayor is absent without leave, an invisible man. And I don't mean because he's a short man, I mean because he's a small man. I mean because he's too small for that job. That's my point of view. You can tell me yours. 0344 499 1000. Now, we'll also be talking about Donald Trump and the United States of America, our special relation, our closest ally, our leader, our father, if you believe the half-wits who run our affairs and report them in the mainstream media. He's just declared war on us. He's just declared war on our industry, on European industry. But hey, Russia's the enemy, isn't it? Not the United States, not Trump, it's Putin who is the enemy. But it's Trump and the USA that just drove a bulldozer through our economic interests with the sanctions he has just applied. And on the subject of Russia, we'll be talking about the miracle that is the London Evening Standard. It's a miracle in the way that, according to the laws of aerodynamics, the bumblebee cannot fly. The London Evening Standard is owned by the former KGB station chief at the Soviet embassy in London. Don't ask me how I know that. It is a free newspaper that just jumped the shark, which, if we hadn't had a whistleblower, we wouldn't necessarily have known, is offering big corporations positive media coverage in exchange for cash. And hey, who's the editor of the London Evening Standard? It's Georgie.